Chad, episode number 5. We're on a roll, man.
We are indeed, my friend. It's great to be back and see you again.
Thanks. Good to see you. How was your week? Any highlights from this week? Were you out on the road playing 90s worship music in any church this week?
No, not this week, but we've got several
Oh,
events coming up. I'm actually prepping for a big event in Ohio, and actually we're going to be in New York City in June doing a 90s worship night. So I was actually on the call just earlier today, getting prepped for that. So it's
really?
just like you, my friend, nonstop, time slot after time slot of calls. So
Yeah.
busy,
So
busy.
awesome. Give me a quick little window as to like when you do these worship nights at churches, what is like a standout highlight for you from, in these opportunities? What do you love the most going into nights like that?
Well, I mean, I really, love seeing the reactions of people,
Yeah.
and part of that, is typically, after we're finished, with the night and tearing down and having conversations and just hearing from the people who've attended, what the night meant to them.
Mhm.
Some it's more of a nostalgic escape, from
Yeah.
all the current craziness of the world, and they can, for a moment in time, kind of go back and
Yeah.
think of what life was back in the 90s. And then I think with others, it's really a spiritual experience in that, uh, it might remind them of kind of where they were at in their walk with the Lord in that time period, and
Yeah.
that may have shifted, in the years between. So
Yeah.
that's really, to me, what's the most special about what we're doing with this
Yeah.
event.
Like I am quite a nostalgic person, but I have to say, I feel like what we're doing here with all these different artists, certainly we're looking back at a nostalgic era, perhaps. But for me
Yeah,
also, it's like this was a season when my life took a shift for a really good purpose. It's almost like the trajectory took a shift. And with this artist that we're going to talk with, Brian Doerksen, today, it's like so much of his music and his voice, so many things about him were instrumental in making a shift in my life. And the nostalgia, quote unquote, for me is thinking I want to get back to that kind of innocence, that first
yeah,
love. And
exactly.
so that's really what it is. It's not just nostalgia, but it's also coming back to our first love, and certainly in the whole era and genre of worship music, there was something very pure that was happening in that season, and I think we're trying to call out the stories for that. So I am excited about talking with Brian. Brian is a good friend. I've known him for many years. I know that you know him. This conversation is going to go super well and very insightful. So I'm looking forward to this. Why don't we bring Brian in and let's head into it? Here we go with
Let's
Brian
do it.
Doerksen and 90s Worship Podcast. Hey, Brian Doerksen, welcome to the 90s Worship Podcast. Love to have you here.
Great to be with you guys.
Yes. Just to begin, I see that you're in a very special space. We were talking about spaces. Now, Chad right now is in a little phone booth. I think he's in about 3 feet by 3 feet. I'm in my office, which has the potential to be a beautiful space. It's a little bit disheveled right now. Where are you, Brian? I know there's a little story behind this space that you're in.
Oh my, yeah. I'm in the Shining Rose
Yeah.
space, which doubles as my creative space and also runs sometimes as a Airbnb guest house. Plus, we host ministries and things that have like leadership meetings in here. So it's a kind of like a multi-purpose room that we designed shortly after we moved back from the UK in about, well, we moved back in 1999. So
Yeah.
in about, yeah, 2001, I had this stirring. I'm actually on the property that I was raised in. So I've been on this
Hmm.
piece of land since I was 4 years old. And my dad had an old kind of like work shed where this building stands. And because we moved back with 6 kids, we had to take over the garage of the house and turn it into bedrooms. So
Yeah.
we needed anyway. So we built this new building. It started as a triple garage, but then I was like, oh, but above the garage I can have this creative space with vaulted ceilings and a stained glass window because I'm
Yeah.
really into roses. So there's roses in the stained glass window, a big river rock fireplace, acoustically designed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the place now where I write my songs, and we meet. We have special meetings in here, prayer times, leadership meetings. So it's a very, very rich space for me.
I love that. I was just telling you before how, how much I love spaces and creating spaces. In fact, I'm in the midst right now of renovating a cabin out in the woods. And that also for me is like the opportunity to create a space. And I think about like leadership development or songwriting, or there's all these ideas that I have. And now that you're just sharing with me, I'm thinking maybe deep in the recesses of my spirit, I am like inspired by what you're doing and just want to live that out. So love that.
Hmm.
Sorry, Chad, that you're stuck in a little phone booth there, that you just can't experience this beauty that Brian and I are in.
Well, you know, in due time. In due
In due
time.
time.
In due time. I do want to say real quick, because I know, Brian Ryan had just asked you about how our 90s worship night events are going. I'm
Yeah.
really excited. Next month we're going to be doing an event, and we're going to do your 25th anniversary version of Come Now Is the Time to Worship. I have just been so
Fantastic.
enjoying that. And the church, actually, they have a saxophonist, so we've
Oh
run the saxophone
yes.
part in there.
Mm-hmm.
But just what you did with that
Yeah.
track, and then the Refiner's
Yes.
Fire anniversary track, I know we'll get into that here in a second, but I just want to
Yeah.
say just such an amazing job, and I have personally been enjoying those.
Bring back the saxophone.
I know, right? Yeah. I used to have like a really great soprano sax that I would play with, that I had in my band, back in the 90s, back in the good old days when we had. Now, of course, in praise charts, we're into bringing out all the instruments, the full orchestra. And Brian, you know that we have so many of your songs fully mapped out, strings, brass, wind, the whole thing. I'm sure that we have got full 200 voice choirs and full orchestras singing your music often. Speaking of that, I noticed that I was looking through your website, Brian, and I saw you. I don't know where you were, but you were on a stage with, it must have been a couple hundred people on stage, and then thousands of people in this sort of like surround sound, full instrument experience.
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
was that, and what was that like? Just give me a little window on that.
Okay, well, that was the Coronation prom in the Royal Albert
Wow.
Hall in London, England, and that was the day Charles was coronated. And then in the evening, let's just say, churches and the faith community of the UK wanted to gather together to pray for their new monarch, but also really to, worship the King of Kings
Hmm.
and just have a thoroughly Christian event on that special day for that nation. And I was the Canadian musical guest. And I've never been in the Royal Albert Hall before. And so so many people have asked me, like, what was that like? And
Yeah.
I would say that the most impactful moment was when I walked out onto the stage for the sound check because I could react. I had this, 120-piece symphony behind me. I had a 300 voice choir behind me. At this point, the seats were empty. They would be soon filled with 5,500 people. But I could react. I could be like a total kid. Like, what's going on
Wow.
right now?
Yeah.
Where am I? This is so
Yeah.
surreal. I could turn around and I could thank the symphony for playing with me, for the
Yeah.
choir for singing with me. So, and then when the evening event actually happened, I had to not be so kind of, kiddish.
Right. Yeah.
Tux and, but yeah, surreal moment just to be there and to sing,
Hmm.
you know, Come Now's the Time. We did a medley of three. Come Now's the Time, Faithful One, and Refiner's Fire. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just
I
surrounded.
mean,
I mean, literally surrounded by
yeah,
people singing, by all the orchestral instruments playing, and there I am, little me in the middle, just
yeah,
kind of like, what's going on here?
soaking it all in.
Yeah.
Totally. What an honor. What an honor to be able to do that and hear the fullness of sound and be at such a significant like world shaping kind of event, the coronation. I mean, wow, that is
Yeah.
amazing. And then to hear you say, "Oh, little me who had a part in writing Refiner's Fire and Come Now's the Time and Faithful One," it's like I know you know this, but in your humility, Brian, it's just like it's amazing the songs that you have written to be able to be in a part of songs that have really shaped the culture of worship for the whole world, and so grateful to you and for the fathering heart that you bring into
Mm.
worship leadership, songwriting, and ministry, and I know you have such an amazing journey. We hope to be able to get a little bit out of that today. So I was just thinking, Brian, one of the things I wanted to ask, actually, both of you, and I'm going to share in this today, is just a life shaping, kind of trajectory shaping moment that you can think back in your life. And I'm going to start, but then I would love for each of you to share that. And the reason why I want to say this, Brian, is because you're a part of this story. I can remember in one of the first spaces, rooms that I had developed when I was fresh out of college. I was living in my parents' basement, and I created this kind of like cabin in the underbelly of our house, and I had like it looked like a log cabin. I had a big 8 foot by 20 foot mural of a waterfall and all that kind of stuff. But this is around 1992, 93, and it's when I got my hands on one of the first albums that I knew of that you were a part of making. It was called Kingdom Come. I think, is that what it was called? Kingdom Come, the one
Your,
from
your,
Langley?
your
Your
kingdom
Kingdom.
come. Yeah.
So I didn't know your face, Brian. I didn't know who you were. I just got my hands on this album and started to listen to it, and it was somehow substantially different than anything I had ever heard before. Somehow it captured my spirit. And the one song in particular, I can remember dimming the lights and I had my sound system set up and I set it sailing just loud in this room and my hands in the air. And I was listening to this song called Exalt the Lord, which starts with this beautiful female voice. And then your voice kind of comes in. The song just sails is for the Lord our God, he is holy. I'm sure you know the
Hmm.
song and can remember it, but that was a moment for me where I was like something stirred, a shift stirred in me, and you were definitely a part of that. And then the rest of that album I would just listen over and over and over again. This is before the days, even I think it was even before Refiner's Fire, before Come Now is the Time to Worship. It was just very early music that was coming out. So I just wanted to tell you that, Brian, and tell you that
Hmm.
if anybody would ask me, define a moment when there was a shift in your life as in the realm of worship and music, that was definitely it.
Hmm.
So can I just ask you, Brian, since what was a moment for you? Could you think of a time when it was like something struck, something shifted in me where you were impacted in a unique way?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the first things that comes to mind is I had heard about Vineyard. I had heard about
Hmm.
Vineyard Ministries. I'd heard about John Wimber, but I didn't know anything what it was. I just heard some stirrings, and there was a hunger in my heart. This was the summer of 1985. Okay.
Hmm.
Working, I work with roses. I was working at a local rose nursery. Long, hard days out in the dust and the dirt, working with raising rose bushes. And I heard about this conference that Vineyard was putting on in Kansas City. And I did one of the most impulsive things. I was just thinking, like I was 19. I was newly married that year. So, and my wife and I and a friend, basically, I went to my boss and said, I had already given notice that I was going to be quitting by, at the end of summer. But I went to my boss and said, I really, really feel like I need to leave the job 1 week earlier because there's this conference happening in Kansas City, and
Yeah.
everything in my spirit says I'm supposed to be there. So anyway, we hopped in this car and drove 40 hours straight. The three of us just alternating drivers, one sleeping in the back, two in the front, three of us 19-year-olds, my wife, myself, and a friend, alternating 40 hours straight so we could get there for the
Wow.
start of the conference. I walked in the back door 30 minutes before the conference started. The conference started with a guy named Danny Daniels and a woman named Patty Kennedy, who and they walked out on the stage, and they were completely casually dressed, t-shirt, blue jeans, no hype, no big anything. And Danny strummed this, I think it was a D chord, and Patty started singing, "You are here, and I
I
behold
behold your
your
beauty.
in this you are here and I behold your beauty,
Yeah.
your presence fills this place." And I remember it was like somebody just came and turned the faucet, and I just started weeping,
Wow.
like, and that was my introduction to kind of more intimate vineyard worship. This was mid 80s. I had had a stirring for this kind of worship music, but I just didn't know that there were other people that had a similar stirring.
Yeah.
And there I was, just the trajectory, as you talk about, the trajectory of my life changed in that moment. Now, if you would have
Hmm.
said to me at that point, you're going to write some of these, intimate worship songs that people around the world will sing, I would have just laughed. I would have been like,
Yeah.
no, that's not, I'm just taking this in. I'm just glad to be in the room.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I still feel like that to this day, whenever I'm able to be in a space like that, I'm just glad to be in the room.
Totally. So authentic, so pure. It's amazing how you tell your story, and I feel like it feels just like I'm telling you my story, but you're a part of my story.
Yeah.
And then you're
Yeah.
telling me your story. That's Danny Daniels, and I remember some of his songs. I remember flipping through those Vineyard songbooks. They had them like these little hymn books, and it's just
Yeah.
all these songs that Danny
Yeah.
Daniels and Andy Park and so many of those you
Eddie
folks had written.
Espinosa. Yeah.
Yes.
Kennedy. Yeah. Cindy Rethmeyer, who
Yeah.
wrote Exalt the Lord, which you talk
Hmm.
about the experience of me and Cindy singing her song,
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, Chad, I want to hear your story in this. What's your experience?
Yeah, it's so cool. I shared this with Brian in a previous discussion we've had, but this is very timely with us. With the 90s Worship Night docuseries, trying to get this first episode out about the Brownsville revival and Lyndall Cooley. But really, a turning point in my life was beginning in 1996. I was 15 years old. Had really just recently gotten to church, just called into worship ministry. In here, I'm trying to figure out what this is all about. And starting to first become aware of resources that are available. And I'll never forget when Brownsville Worship Volume 1 and Volume 2 came out. It's just life changing. And one of the first things I hear from the album, don't know anything about Vineyard at this point in time at all, but I just hear this song, how could I say there is no God when all around creation calls? And I just fall in love with this song, especially. And I told Brian, most about the song "Creation Calls" is where it gets to that part of the chorus where it says "I believe," but it's just like that's the payoff of all the lyrics of the song and what it's talking about. And just I got an opportunity to first meet and talk with Brian, as we're working on the docuseries. He's like, "Oh yeah, I wrote that song right by the tree outside here." Where he's at. So
Yeah.
it was just really a full circle moment, but it was those albums, and that was one of the songs that just really drew me into modern worship and what it was about. So thank you, Brian.
So great. Um, So, Brian, a word that's coming to mind now, I just want to talk a little bit about. I know you have a real heart for mentorship and sort of pouring into new and young worship leaders. Could you talk about a couple of themes that you find coming into your conversations over and over as you think about raising up this new generation of like modern worship leaders? What in your voice do you want to speak to this generation in 2020 that you carry from, say, the 1970s, 80s, and 90s? What is the message that we're hoping to kind of carry forward into our modern world?
Hmm. Wow, I mean that's a that's a big question, and
Is
there's a
it?
lot, a
Yeah.
lot stirring, and a lot of need, like there always is. I mean, I
Yeah.
think this sense of intergenerationalness and conversations from one generation to the next. And I know, like even during COVID, I did a hymns project to do something intentional with my dad, who's
Yeah.
87, and say, "You're not done. Your generation isn't done." Just like, I've been doing some live events recently. The Come Now's the Time to Worship tour,
Yeah.
and one of the people singing with me is 17-year-old Zoe Seward, the
Hmm.
daughter of Stacy and Marika, who I've been working with. And so we have, in the same night, we have an 87-year-old, me, in
Yeah.
my 50s, and Marika and people like that in their 40s, and then Zoe, a teenager, and we're all singing together. And we're saying, we need each other. We need to learn from each other. I mean, there's this powerful, of course, prophetic invitation that ends the what we often call as the Old Testament. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts, the children to their, like this sense of the turning to each other as generations and say, okay, we need each other, and we respect each other, and we learn from each other, and we also give freedom to each other to make uh, our expression sound genuine mother tongue to us. I
Hmm.
mean, I think that was one of my foundational things for me when I got into this. I thought, if I'm going to do this and if I'm going to sustain it for life, I can't sustain pretending to be
Hmm.
somebody I'm not.
Hmm.
Kind of music that moves me, the styles, the genres, the voicings of lyrical phrasings and melody and chords and rhythms. It has to be genuinely me, but in so doing so, I'm giving permission to the next generation to be genuinely them, and I'm giving permission to my dad's generation to remain genuinely true to who they are.
Yeah.
This isn't about, I think where we're heading with this isn't uniformity, it's unity and diversity. And
Hmm.
so I feel
Hmm.
like the more I interact with people now, I feel this yearning for legacy, for and for the from the younger people, they actually genuinely want to know not just the product, i.e., the song, i.e., the whatever,
Hmm.
the video. They want to go behind the scenes, and they want to know what was it that gave birth to that song? What was stirring? How did you get there? What were some of the roadblocks along the way? And then having those kinds of real conversations
Hmm.
encourage both generations, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost one of the challenges we have in this era versus say in the 90s and 80s. There's so much music that's so prevalent to us that we're finding ourselves just racing to catch up with learning other people's songs. And then it's hard to, have your own story about a song that you haven't really written you're just like, there's Elevation and there's Hillsong and there's Bethel, and then there's all these
Yeah.
songs, and they're all so compelling, but they aren't ours per se.
Right.
Wonder how can we grapple with that? Because obviously we're not all songwriters. We're not all going to
Yeah.
show up on a Sunday morning and be like, here's Refiner's Fire that I just wrote, on Tuesday, because that's
Yeah.
we don't all
Yeah.
have that gift. But
Well,
yet
I
you're
mean,
talking about having a story of a song I didn't write. Uh,
yeah, yes. I mean,
Help me with that.
yeah. Well, let me say something maybe that sounds a bit outrageous at first, but just stay with me for a moment. As
Okay.
I believe that in every church that they should sing at least 50% songs written from within, that there should be a healthy
Wow.
balance between importing and local songs. But of course, in order
Yeah.
for that to happen, those
Yeah.
local songwriters have to be encouraged, trained, and supported so that they can write quality songs that are at a similar quality level as some of the great imported songs. But the thing is so um, when I described like my trajectory changing moment, it wasn't my song, but it was a song that touched my heart. It, even though I didn't write it, it became a heart song for me because it spoke what I wanted to say to my maker, right? It spoke for me, not necessarily to me. It spoke for me. So then I
Hmm.
challenge songwriters everywhere. Like, first of all, take in the best imports, so to speak, the best songs that connect with your heart, that become a heart song for you, and let those songs mentor you. Like,
Hmm.
sing them, put them in your mouth, put them in your fingers, play them on your guitars, on your piano, sing them in the secret place, sing them in the sanctuary, sing them with your congregation, and let them mentor you. But over time, what's going to happen is you're going to notice a gap. You're going to have something that's going to stir in your heart, and you're going to go, oh, we need to be singing, fill in that blank, whatever that gap
Hmm.
is. And you're going to look for a song and you're not going to find it. And guess what? That's your
Hmm.
songwriting assignment right there, to fill that
Hmm.
gap with an expression that's mother tongue to you. And then as soon as you start doing that, you realize, oh, I need some help. Oh,
Hmm.
I need to be shored up on my lyric writing skills, or oh, I need to co-write with somebody maybe who's stronger melodically than me. Maybe my bent is more lyrics and somebody else's gift is melody, and we work together. However it works,
Hmm.
what happens is when you have the right mix of import and singing local, um, your church congregation owns this expression at such a deep level because it feels like an expression of them. And
Hmm.
so then the good import, absolutely, we need other people. When I say import, I'm not just talking about what the worship movements are writing today. I'm talking about the great hymns of the past. I'm
Yeah.
talking about the songs from the 80s and the 90s and
Yeah.
all the eras, that we have a healthy mixture of quality imports from every era and quality local songs that say what our heart wants to say. And for me, there's a lot of people that approach it, kind of like theologically or philosophically, and I understand the need for that. I believe in good theology too, but for me, it's about a heart song. It's about,
Hmm.
because I think it's when we hear our heart song
Yeah.
first from somebody else, and then eventually from maybe perhaps from within us, that's what is sustainable for life.
Hmm. So good. Does that stir anything in you, Chad? What do you hear when you hear
Yeah,
Brian sharing
I could
that?
just think, Amen. That's all I can say to that.
Amen. Hey. I'm just remembering the 2 interviews ago, we had an opportunity to talk with Brenton Brown. Brenton brought up your name, Brian. He told some funny stories about going for walks with you. And sounds like you guys have quite the relationship. And he just says it like it is. So
Oh
great.
yeah.
But he shared about when you came to England, because when we were asking him similar stories of like, when did things shift for you, or when did you kind of get started? And he talked about you coming to London and just reaching out. And in those days, no one knew Brenton or some of those
Yeah.
days, and this all sort of preempts this Hungry album, which is kind of like iconic for that era. I'm just thinking of, I want to hear a few stories about this because it was a season that we all know about. Those of us who are from the 90s know that album and how impacting it was for us. But you sort of landed into a foreign space with a mission to harvest the local sound.
Yeah.
And it became like a world changing album of worship. Could you just walk us through a little bit of that experience, what that was like for you?
Well, sure. And it actually comes back to what I was just talking about, because
I
when I
know, yeah.
arrived in the UK, they were only singing imports, right?
Ah,
And I
yeah.
was like, you guys, like, who are you? What's on your heart? Yes, sing good imports, but what's mother tongue to you? What would the sound of worship from your heart sound like? And how does even the geography, even the place of the United Kingdom and Ireland and Wales and Scotland and Devon and all
Hmm.
of the sections of that, what is the history and the geography, and how is that going to shape an expression of worship? Because when we worship out of who we genuinely are, we have face to face encounters with God. We have true intimacy because we are being who we really are. And then God is revealing God's heart to us, right? It's this exchange. And so, at first they were like, well, I don't think we can write songs. Like, they're intimidated, right? They have
Hmm.
all the fully produced, finished stuff. And so I had this crazy idea. I thought, okay, I asked all the churches. There was about 75 churches I was responsible to help try and train up their worship leaders and try and get them writing songs. And I had them send in videos. This is back in pre-digital, right? Video
Hmm. Oh,
VHS
not from their
cassettes.
iPhones? Not from
Yeah,
their
no,
iPhones?
no iPhone. And I had the pastors or the leaders on the sly video a Sunday morning worship time and then send it to me so that I could watch these videos and get a sense for who the worship leaders were, what their musicality level was like, what their vocal singing styles were like, and all of that. And out of that, that's what led me to pick about a dozen people that I said, I'm going to focus on mentoring you. You're going to have full access to me. You're going to come to London to see me every few months. I'm going to come see you. And Brenton Brown was in that group. Catherine Scott
Hmm.
was in that group. Michael
Hmm.
Fry was in that group. And anyway, and then we just started building a relationship. And I kept on asking them, what's your heart song? And what does your heart song sound like? And then they started sending me demos. And then I would go, oh, I love that. Not so sure about. And I just basically mentored them. I guided them. I encouraged
Hmm.
them. And I just kept saying, oh man, this is going to be amazing when you release your heart song. And sure enough, it started happening. 6, 9 months into the process, they started teaching their local churches some of these songs they were writing. And people started going, they start singing songs like Lord Reign in Me and All Who Are Thirsty and Hungry.
Hmm.
And they start going, oh, this is working. So then out of that, we did 2 recordings. The first one was Come Now Is the Time, which I fought them long and hard. I wanted them to call it something else because I
Right.
wanted it to be one of their songs.
Yeah.
That was when I wrote Come Now Is the Time to Worship. Well, I was living there and
Yeah.
working with them, and no, they said, no, we need to call that's the gateway song. It kind of
Yeah.
opens the door. And then our follow-up project was Hungry, and I produced that, but I did it with so much. It it was all of us together. That group of a dozen leaders, musicians like Callum Reese, that iconic drum part at the beginning of Hungry. I mean, Callum still drums with me, and he lives in Canada now, actually in Calgary. But that.
Hmm.
And I remember saying,
Hmm.
"Okay, Callum, I want you to play this kind of part." And he tried to go, "Yeah, yeah, that. Okay, now
Hmm.
let's loop that, let's affect that." And because there's all of those elements too in that project. There's not just the songs, the heart songs, but it's also trying to produce it in such a sonic way that it reflected their culture, that it sounded like them, right?
Hmm.
And not it also had to sound like a little bit like that era, that time. Anyway, so yeah, that was what we did. And remember that when I
Hmm.
arrived, they were almost singing completely imports. And by the time I left 2.5 years later, those songs not only had started traveling the world, but the most important thing for them is they were transforming their local churches' worship times, because they were singing their heart songs with their congregation, and it was making a huge difference to all of them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What a story. Chad, as I'm listening to that, I'm just thinking, do you realize, probably more than any other artist, how many of those songs we're just talking about here are showing up on your 90s worship night first project? I'm just looking. There's All Who Are
Yeah.
Thirsty. There's Hungry, of course, the title track from one of those. Breathe. Was Breathe on one of those?
Yeah, so what
Th-
happened? I would tell you just a quick story about
okay.
Breathe. What happened
Yeah.
with Breathe was Breathe had been released on a vineyard touching the Father's heart on the backside and had been completely ignored. Okay. And I heard it, and it was done kind of a little bit like country rock. And I just thought, oh, there's gold in here, but I'm not sure about that. People have just So I heard it, and I went to Catherine Scott and I said, I have an idea. And I played her the song, and I said, I want you to do this song, but we're going to strip away all of that original arrangement. I want you just to walk up to the piano and just heart to heart, this is the air I breathe, with
Mm.
just the piano. And anyway, that's what we did, and it was a powerful moment on the night. It was written by Marie Barnett in the States, but it was that record. As far as I know, people hadn't paid attention to the song until it
Yeah.
came out on Hungry. And then Michael W. Smith heard it on Hungry, and then he recorded it. That was all part of the process. But it's interesting. Sometimes songs are great songs, but if they don't have the right arrangement, or it's not the right time, they just kind of languish. They just kind of
Hmm.
sit there ignored. But then if you rearrange it, or you get the right person, and I just had this kind of feeling like if Catherine were to sing it with her kind of the ache that's in her voice, it's going to be received in a very different way. So that was
Hmm.
that was fun for me to have that idea, and then to watch what happened to that song in
Hmm.
the subsequent years.
It's
That
interesting that the genius of your idea was not, what could we add to this to layer it up, but it
Yeah,
was, you were thinking, well, what could we strip away in
yeah,
order to let that angst shine through? And
yeah,
Catherine's voice in particular, because when I think of that, I haven't listened to that recording for quite a while, but I could hear it in my head, and I can hear Catherine's voice. There's something so captivating about that. I mean, sorry, Michael W. Smith, you did a great job with the song, but I don't think he outshines that original from that moment. He's just trying to build on something you had a role
mm,
in shaping, but just the thought of the beauty of it was stripping away. I wonder if some of us worship leaders could just soak that in a little bit, like on a Sunday morning. Could we just simplify this down a bit? Could we just strip away
mhm.
and let some of the rawness kind of shine through? I mean, that almost is what is so attractive about the era that you brought in through, like Refiner's Fire, and some of these songs that you had done. These are songs I just think about, just me on an acoustic guitar, like, and nothing, it could be so beautiful. And you even have a way of playing your guitar. I don't know if you know how to define what you do with that guitar, and there's a beautiful story about it, but I
Well,
love the
What's
sound
so
that you
funny you're
bring out.
saying that is because I'm such a simple musician. And
Yeah.
recently at one of the Come Now's the Time to Worship tour events, we had this VIP reception before people can come and ask Q&As and meet and greet with me and stuff. And so we were doing that, and then one guy puts up his hand, and he goes, "Oh, I just need to ask you about like," and he named one of the songs, and that's really amazing, intricate finger style guitar playing you're doing there. And I go, "Oh, stop right there." I said, "That ain't me. That's Brian Doerksen. He's a
Yeah.
genius." Da, da, da,
Yes.
da. But if you want to know me, I
Yeah.
strum the chords, I do a bit of basic picking, and I open up my heart and I sing the
Oh,
song. And I don't get fancy. And there is a time to have that
yeah.
more intricate stuff with other musicians in a string
Yeah.
section, and I love that stuff. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about heart song. It's about having as little as possible distracting me and the
Yeah.
people from the core of what the song is trying to say. And so
Hmm.
when you describe, well, how do I describe my guitar playing? I don't know. I don't know if it can get any simpler. I'm just either like,
Yeah.
some basic strumming, some muting sometimes just for rhythm or whatever.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, my producer says, "Oh, Brian, you have a little bit of a style of how you do that." I
Yeah.
don't know. I just play it simply.
Yeah. Well, it comes through. Something slices through and makes me feel like I want to emanate that, to and maybe the story is any of us can if you just stop, sure, get great at your at your instrument. It's great to know all the fancy scales and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, you're going to find that the thing that pierces through is not your fancy guitar playing. I had this same conversation. I was interviewing Matt Redman just a couple months ago, and I was asking him, the way you play guitar is so amazing. Like, I just love, and he's like, man, I'm just like a 4-chord guy. I just put a capo on and just strum away. Is nothing complicated. But somehow I think there's something so profound about it, and yet what he's doing, I could do, Chad could do, we
Right.
any of us could
But
do if you just yeah.
that's so beautiful what you're just saying, because and that was one of the mottos of the Vineyard movement. What John Wimber used to always say, everybody can play. And he
Yeah.
was meaning it in terms of broadest ministry, everything. Like, this isn't you don't have to have a special degree to preach the gospel. You don't have a special degree to help the poor. You don't have a special
Yeah.
degree to worship. Like, everybody can do this stuff, right? And I
Yeah.
love, Ryan, what you're saying, because I think is one of the things that is the best part of worship music. It should be. Everything we do should inspire everybody out there, whether they're alone in their bedroom or in their like, we can all do this. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be complicated. It does need to come from the heart.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does need to be rooted and grounded in love.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
everybody can do it.
It's good.
Love it.
And Chad, this is something I feel like I just want to say to you in doing this 90s worship night whole thing is I've just got this word nostalgia because you say it a lot. And I know we think it's about nostalgia, but it's about so much more than that. I feel like you're calling people back to some of these core truths like what Brian is saying, and that remember the days when anyone could play these songs, and that what was really important is how your heart and your angst and the passion and the purity of the sound would come through. That's what I remember, and I do feel like I love all the music that's out today. Sometimes it is overstimulating, overwhelming, because I think I can't make that sound, make that rhythm, make that beat. My band could never sound like that without a multi-track turned way up so that we sound like someone we're not. It's just the challenge of our current era. So, Chad, why don't you, as we sort of kind of wind out here, tell us a little bit about you bringing in some of Brian's music into the 90s Worship Night opening album. A couple of his songs are showing up. One in particular is really highlighted with Brenton Brown. So tell us a little bit about that, and I'll show some images of the site and music as we do.
Yeah. Well, definitely, as we were putting this album together, I wanted to do something to honor Brian, but wanted to do something fun that I hadn't seen, anywhere before. So like, man, if we could get Brenton to come in and, lead one of Brian's songs, that would be pretty awesome. I thought, at least. So I brought the idea up to Brenton. He loved it. So we settled on, Refiner's Fire, and Brenton had some nice input as far as production wise, kind of what he was thinking. So we collaborated together and made it happen. And I funny enough, listened to that on my drive into work today. I listened to our version of that, and definitely I gotta say too, in Brian's 35th anniversary of Refiner's Fire, an amazing recording. Everyone needs to check that out. It's just spectacular. But with what Brian's doing, what we're doing, I think we're kind of flowing in that same stream of just let's draw some attention back to what the Lord did through some of these pieces of content in that era, because there's a lot to learn from that and a lot to celebrate. And that's definitely, what we're trying to do with everything 90s Worship Night.
Yeah. It's amazing, Brian. When I look at your website, I was just showing here, it's like there's so much, 35th anniversary, 25th anniversary. We're definitely in that era now where we're remembering the past, right? But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful... And then hymns, of course, this is going way back, but it's just all about rich heritage that you're bringing out. So how's it been in this Come Now's the Time? You're in a concert series right now. Have you finished them, or are you in it right now?
No, we kind of just started doing a series of Come Now's the Time to Worship concerts. We did a couple in California. We did one in Vancouver, one in my hometown here in Abbotsford, and then I'm going to do a couple of things in the UK, and then we're doing a Canadian tour in June, and throughout Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario, and then we'll do more in the fall. So we'll do like, I don't know, 20 or 30 of them this year, where we'll do nights called Come Now's the Time to Worship. Yeah.
So I guess you're not retired yet. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Oh my gosh. No, I've got so many things going on. We're releasing the new Unlocking Your Worship Songs course. I'm prepping to do a whole new album of love songs called Love for a Lifetime. I've got a whole bunch of new worship songs I want to record. There's just stuff to do.
So great. Well, Brian, this has been a treat. You've just taken us into some real depths of conversation, and I hope that us young and older worship leaders who are leading now in this era of the 2020s and 2030s and moving on, and amidst all of the input from so many sources and so many well-produced albums, just not to forget that very special, unique sound that really could shine through just on you and a few chords and the acoustic guitar, and to not forsake the power of that. I think that's a message that's coming through. So Chad, any final thoughts you've got as we wrap this up here?
No, just very thankful for Brian and all that he has done and is doing, and just so grateful to be able to call you friend. Brian feels the same way.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, this has been Ryan Dahl, Brian Doerksen, and Chad Gentry from 90s Worship Podcast, 90s Worship Night. You can go to Praise Charts and get all the music from the album. Go to Brian Doerksen's website. We'll link to that as well as to the 90s Worship Night.com. And Chad, all the best to you as you continue going from church to church and sharing these stories, the docuseries that's coming out, so many great things. So thank you for all that. It's been a joy. So God bless you all, and we'll see you at the next episode. Talk to you later.